everybody, and welcome to Puck University, the first half wrap, the full first half wrap, and the edition right before Christmas. We're recording this on December 19th, 2018. I'm Chris Lynch, and I should say we're going to start off with some very sad news from Puck University, some very sad news in the college hockey world, some very sad news from the people at Sports Talk Florida, where I've written for a couple times and where my friend and co-host and creator of this podcast, Tim Williams, was also the site's chief editor. He and I were planning on doing an episode from Punter's Pub, the spiritual home in a lot of ways for Northeastern University hockey and the Northeastern fan base. We were not able to record it. He made it up to Boston, but he died overnight. He had a heart attack, and he died overnight, and you won't be hearing his voice on this podcast anymore, and I won't have the great opportunity of getting to sit down with him, whether it was ever in person or whether he and I had to call in. So this first segment of the podcast is going to be a tribute to him and an explanation as to how this podcast came into being in the form that it exists today. Tim had this idea when writing for the American Sports Net and working for them. They were a group based in Boston. He went to his higher-ups there and said that he wanted a podcast, and they gave it to him. No one had the name Puck University yet, so he jumped on the chance. He got that moniker, he got that name for himself, and he created it in the 2016-2017 season. He ran it for the first stretch of that season. He met me on St. Patrick's Day for the semifinals of the Hockey East tournament. There were two games that for me at Inside Hockey, the people I'm still with now, that we were writing with, that we were covering there at the time. The two games were, the first one, a semifinal between Notre Dame and UMass Lowell, in which Lowell ended up winning, I think 5-1 or something very convincing like that. And the second game, another edition in the Boston University-Boston College rivalry, where he learned that I'm a BU guy and he was a Northeastern guy, and we had a rivalry out with Boston College, and it was a very controversial game. BC moved on in a very great and very thrilling game, but again, a very controversial ending to it all. He and I hit it off through those conversations right there, right then, on press row, on level 9 of the Boston Garden, just talking about the sport, talked politics, we talked about things that normal friends would talk about, as though it was so easy. It was so easy to listen to him. It was so easy to talk with him. It was so comfortable to just be a friend with him, almost off the drop. The next day was the Hockey East Championship game. We watched and wrote about, for our respective places, we watched UMass Lowell win their third Hockey East Championship. And we watched them beat BC 4-3 in a very tight, very good hockey game at the Garden. And he had me on the next week's edition of Puck University for the preview of the regionals right before the 2017 regionals. And I was driving back from Providence, where a regional featuring, I think it was Western Michigan and Air Force in one game, Providence and Harvard in the other. I drove back and called in, and it was me, Tim, a guy whose name I'm completely blanking on from North Dakota, who was a big Fighting Hawks fan. Still referred to them as the Fighting Sioux at the time, but because I guess that's what he knew them as when he went to school there, but they're officially now the Fighting Hawks. We talked about what we expected out of the tournament, and from then on, it became a regular thing where I'd be on every single week with him, and it's been like that for the last college hockey season and a half, where I've been a regular collaborator with him on projects like this, on making sure this podcast gets out weekly, on trying to provide some analysis, some look at the world of the sport, and it's unbelievable to me that I won't be able to do that with him anymore, that I won't be able to talk about this sport anymore with him. I'll miss my friend. I'm sure that you all will miss his introductions. I'm sure that you all will miss his analysis and his perspective and his history. He was a treasure trove of history. It was a treasure trove of understanding the sport and having a deep and abiding love for Northeastern specifically, for Matthews Arena, for the Dog Pound, for that building at Matthews Arena, for his school, for his city in Boston, for what became his city in Tampa, where he moved down and covered the Lightning very, very well, and gave me a chance to cover them as well. He gave me a chance to be on this podcast. He gave me a chance to write film reviews over at News Talk Florida. He gave me a chance to cover college football, the PGA Tour, the National Hockey League, the regular season, the playoffs, and gave me a chance to be in press scrums with Steven Stamkos and John Cooper and Alex Ovechkin in the Eastern Conference Finals. And he gave me a chance to be on this podcast and to make it our effort. And this was our thing that we did together every week. And I'm unbelievably sad that I won't be able to continue doing this with him from here on out. That doesn't mean that this podcast is ending, though. I'm going to continue recording these episodes in his honor and in his memory. I'm going to continue to do this show. I'm going to continue talking about this sport because I've heard from some people, and I don't remember where exactly I heard it, but I think the sentiment that strikes me the strongest right now is one of the best ways you can honor people is to do a job that they would be proud of, is to go and do work that they would want you to do, that they would be right along with you, that they would sign on for, and that they would want to go out and be a part of with you. Tim, my friend, I'm going to continue doing this podcast. I'm going to continue doing this kind of work as though you still want me to. I'm going to continue doing this stuff with you. For you, I mean. If you believe in God as I do, then I'd ask you to say a prayer to the big man that might take care of our friend, my friend. And say a prayer of gratitude for everything that he helped to create. He helped create a regular piece of the college hockey sports talkscape, I guess. He was a great and very honorable man. I'm endlessly grateful to him for giving me the opportunity to be on this podcast, to talk about this sport, a sport that I've come to love, a topic that there's so many different angles and so many stories. He's one of the best that I've ever been around, and I'm going to miss him. I think there's two ways about that. I'm going to miss my friend. But the show must go on. I'll honor you, my friend, and I'll continue to talk about this sport. I'll continue to do this work, and I'll continue to go on and have as much fun with this sport as I can. I'll bring on guests, I'll bring on angles, I'll bring on topics. We'll make this place a great place to talk about college hockey. In honor of its creator. In honor of one of the best friends that I think I've ever had. With that, let's start talking about the goings-on and the things that happened in the sport over the last weekend. And there weren't that many games comparatively. We're right before the holidays. There were only 2 days of games this past weekend, on Friday, December 14th, and Saturday, December 15th. I'll start with the games that I was at. So on Friday night, I was at Agganis Arena to watch Dartmouth visit Boston University at what was a very good crowd for all that we've talked about here, for the lack of attendance and the concerns that we've had for Agganis Arena not being able to churn out enough people. I feared that the crowd would be lacking, to put it one way, in this game against Dartmouth, because it's a school that has an old-time continuous round of contests against BU, because they were ECAC foes for a very long time before BU left the ECAC and went off and helped to create the Hockey East Conference in 1984. So it's been a while since they were that kind of regular competitor, that kind of regular force to be a threat, I guess. And it's been a while since they were that kind of regular opponent for each other. But this was a very good crowd. It was just under 4,000 people, which is about 2/3 capacity at Agganis. And I've said this every time I've mentioned BU's attendance concerns, and I will say this again. The people who go to those games at Agganis Arena are involved. They are loud. They are a part of the game, and the visitors feel it. The visitors absolutely feel that crowd and feel the sound of it. Thing is, though, I don't know if that was felt. Well, I should say that it was a pretty even first period, with Dartmouth only winning the shots 7-5, and Jake Ottinger playing very, very well. Cam Crotty got the first goal about just under 5 minutes into the game. Kevin Killistoff knotted it up at about the 10:06 mark of the second period, and it didn't take BU long for answer, and it was a good thing to see when Patrick Harper got himself back in order and got picked pocket of a Dartmouth player and got the goal to answer 1:04 after the Killistoff goal, which Harper's played in 16 games this year. He only has 7 points, and he only had one goal, which he got in that Friday game against Dartmouth. He's been a really, really curious player to pay attention to, because he started off his sophomore season on a wicked pace. He ended up playing only 20 games that season and had 21 points, so over a point a game. And on pace of point production per game, he was the best that the BU Terriers had, and he didn't play the back half of the season after World Juniors. So it's a great sign to see from him that he was involved in it, and goal scoring is oxygen for a guy like him. Goal scoring is a big part of it. He had an assist on the Ty Amonte goal as well, which came nearing the final minutes of the third period. And by the way, Amonte has made the baby shark celebration his trademark thing. And when he goes down to slap fives with his bench, they all join in and all make a big thing of it. And it's nice to see little trademark celebrations like that become a regular piece of the celebration line. But Harper was really the best story to see for his sake. It's a good thing that he might be able to get himself back in rhythm, and that's a good thing to see for the BU Terriers, who need a good second half again, because their record right now, they are 6-8-2. They are 5-5-2 in Hockey East, and they have played 12 games in conference. The only other two teams in their conference to play double-digit Hockey East games, UConn, who's in 8th place and teetering on the edge of being in the postseason at all, after the Hockey East Conference rearranged their playoff format so that the bottom 3 teams are out. UConn has 5 points. That's currently tied with New Hampshire, who, by the way, UConn has played 4 more games than the UNH Wildcats, because that's how the schedule worked out to this point. So BU, UConn have played 12. The only other team to play double-digit conference games to this point is Merrimack, and they've played 10. And they are also on the bubble of missing the playoffs entirely. They have 4 points, just one behind UConn and New Hampshire. Those two are 3 behind Maine. BU currently, they're hovering right at the 500 mark. They have 12 games played. They're 5-5-2 in Hockey East. They have 12 points behind Providence and Northeastern at 13. Providence has played one more game than the Huskies and has one more in the loss column at 6-2-1 compared to 6-1-1. BC and UMass have 14 points. They're in a points tie for first place. UMass has played only 7 games and won all of them. BC has played 9 conference games and is 6-1-2. The problem for BC is that they are also 6-2-2. They're 0-5 outside of conference. And I've coined it for them. I've coined it for them as they have BC-itis, because this is a long time running right now of 3 years of struggling outside of conference. They have not won a non-conference game since November of 2016. That's not good. So they need to have a good run in Hockey East, or they need to win some non-conference games in order to get themselves into the potential for an at-large bid. Otherwise, they need to win out. And they're going to have to beat some combination of probably UMass, which is still a weird concept, even though I do believe in that Minutemen team, but they still have to beat them. They're going to have to probably beat Northeastern, and they may well have to beat Providence. Maybe even they'll have to beat BU, but it's a very interesting time to be in Hockey East, and it was a good sign to see BU put up a real fight. Jake Ottinger with 33 saves on 34 shots faced. Cam Crotty, the other big story of that game, was cut from the World Junior team for Canada. Flew across country that day, across continent, I should say, that day, from British Columbia over to Boston. Got 3 hours of sleep, played in the game, and scored a very nice cut goal for BU. It was a great day for him, and it's a good sign to see that the Terriers have some fight. They have plenty of talent. They could make some noise again this year, but they're going to have to do it by winning the Hockey East tournament if they want to make the big dance this year at the rate that they've gone. They will have a bunch of non-conference games remaining in their schedule because they played a big amount of their conference schedule already. Let's switch perspective over to Dartmouth now for a second, because both these teams in this game had some really interesting positions to be in. Dartmouth, a lot of people in college hockey thought that they would be a good upset team to pay attention to, and by and large, they've done that. They're third place in the ECAC right now. They have 9 points at 4-2-1 in 7 games played. The two ECAC teams in double digits at this point, Yale, 6-2-1, and Quinnipiac, 6-2-0. So the Bulldogs have played one more game to get them the one extra point between the top teams in the ECAC. Dartmouth, 4-2-1. Trouble is, there is some BC-itis going on with them. 4-6-1, which means if you're keeping track, they have not done particularly well outside of conference. They're 0-4 to this point outside of Hockey East play. In those games, they hosted and lost to Vermont 5-3 on November the 24th. They got swept by UNH, including a 3-2 loss at home at Thompson Arena, and then a 4-0 thumping at the Whittemore Center over in Durham to close out a pretty good close for the Wildcats to the first half of the year under new coach Mike Souza. And, of course, this most recent 4-1 loss to BU, which they did get some real offensive pressure. They got some real chances, and I think they'll be a factor, but there is some real concern to be had over that Dartmouth team. That Adrian Clark, who's by and large been a pretty good goaltender so far this year, did not have a good night. He let in 3 goals on on how many shots did he end up facing? He let in 3 goals. B only got 22 shots away. He only ended up facing 21 of them, as the last one was into an empty net. So 3 goals on 21 shots faced, that's not good. So yeah, I'd be a bit concerned if I were, because that's a not small game against a good opponent. Clark hovering at a 263 goals against and a 907 save percentage. That's at 49th out of all numbered and officially listed goaltenders in college hockey. That can be improved on. He's had good games, and I still think Dartmouth is a good threat for upset picks coming out of the ECAC, and he's a good threat for the sport, but I just have to ask for some concerns about that Dartmouth team hovering at 4-6-1, which I should note, as also there was some history accomplished for the Big Green earlier on in the season when Bob Gaudette, the long-term head coach of the Big Green, won his 309th game in his long career. He is the winningest coach in the history of Big Green hockey, and this is a program that was in the first 2 Frozen Fours and the first 2 national championship games. This is a program that has some real history to it, and that hosts the Ledyard Bank Classic, which is one of the better and more long-standing holiday traditions that college hockey has. So congratulations to Bob Gaudette for 309 wins. You get that many wins at any point in time. He's been the head coach of the Big Green since the 97-98 season. He's a good coach. He's produced his share of good players. He's made that program something to be respected and something to be appreciated in college hockey. So I think it's a great thing to see him do as well as he has, and has his team in. It really is a good position. For all my concerns about Clark and the defense and goaltending, it's a very good thing to see him be so successful, and they'll have the Ledyard Bank Classic to try and continue that round of success. But we'll get to the upcoming games when we get there. The Saturday game that I was at was another non-conference game. It was between Penn State and Princeton at the Wells Fargo Center in Philadelphia, which means I left very early on Saturday morning and got down to Philly and liked the setup of where the buildings were and realized how good a tailgating setup there was. And it was a good crowd. It was smaller than I wanted, or smaller than I thought it would be, considering that Penn State travels so incredibly well for everything. And it should be noted that it was a good crowd still. It was an involved crowd. But this event, the Philadelphia College Hockey Face-Off, has been a thing for the last 6 years, ever since Penn State went D1 in the 2012-13 season. And it was a really fun time to get to see this building. It's a good setup. It's perfect for tailgating. It's perfect for just enjoying the sport. It's a very, very strong setup, all things considered. Opened up in 96. It's been the home for the 76ers and the Flyers ever since then. It's a good home, but here's the problem I ran into with it. The hockey seating capacity for that building is 19,543. That game, 8,490. That's not very good. And I got to be at least a little bit concerned about that factor. But again, the crowd was involved and they were into it. And the Penn State fans had some really good chirps. And I'm happy for them because they have a good team. They have a very fun team that was even good without Evan Barrett being in that game, because he was at camp for the World Junior team for Team USA. So he wasn't there to be a part of it. They were missing one other person from their lineup. Arnie Tavlite. I am very sorry if I missed that name. He was in camp for the World Junior team for Finland. He's from Espoo, Finland. So they missed two of their bigger guys, but they had a good performance to open up this game with a shooting performance of 15-3 in the first period. They led 3-1 after Josh Tevez got the opener, 2:24 in from Ryan Kuffner and Max Varanow, who will be a bigger factor later on in this game. They had 3 unanswered goals with Brendan Biro, Nate Susi, Chase Berger all getting tallies. Not the big and powerful names, but they play the puck off the board so well. It's really a marvel how well they move the puck around, how well they play the pass, how well they've realized that hockey doesn't have the same kind of out of bounds that baseball has. Its foul line, and it's very clear and very defined as in a mark on the grass. You can be on the same surface, and if the ball touches down on one side of a line on grass, it's in play, and on the other side of the line, it's out of play. Same kind of thing for basketball, same kind of thing for football. Hockey doesn't really have that. There's an out of bounds if you put it above the glass and into the stands, or if you put it into the top netting above the net, then play stops and the puck is out of bounds. But for regular play, there isn't a traditional out of bounds. You can play it off the boards and the puck is still in play. And Penn State realizes that better than most other people and teams that I've seen play the game. They moved the puck beautifully, worked the boards, made things happen. They played with speed. They played with pace. They really were an excellent, excellent performance right up until Alec Marsh opened up the second period with a goal, his 4th of the year, 17 seconds in. And then they pretty much handed the game over to Peyton Jones and leaned on him to get things done. They chased Ryan Furland, the Princeton starter, who had a great run to the ECAC tournament and has kind of struggled this year. In part, Princeton, talented as their offense is, they haven't had the best performance to this point so far in the season. I mean, entering that game, Princeton was hovering at about 40th in goals per game. They went up to 36th, but that's still in the bottom half of college hockey for goals per game. It's close, but they are still they're still in that bottom line, that second half setup. So not exactly the position that they wanted to be in. Penn State continues their offensive prowess, 94 goals overall at the end of the first half. Second place is Bowling Green, who I'll talk about later. They have 70 goals. Holy cow, that's 24 more for Penn State. They're averaging for goals per 5.22. Second place is St. Cloud at 4.12, over 1 goal a game more than the second place team in the country. Holy cow. It's been that kind of year for Penn State where things are working. But then we ran into the problem that has kind of made me wonder about Penn State's possibility for a national championship, which is that they handed it over to the goaltender and didn't give him that much help. And to be fair on Peyton Jones, he did everything he possibly could have. He gave up a goal late on in the second period to Max Varanow, who got another one in the final 5 minutes and change of the third. And then Ryan Kuffner really played a puck very well. Varanow rung the crossbar, and the puck bounced out. And rather than give up on it, he tracked down the puck off the crossbar and put it into the open net that was left there for after Jones had slid over to try and play the opposite side. So they tie it up with 1 minute and 8 seconds left. And it was a very entertaining overtime, but no one got a goal, and it ends in a 4-4 tie. Princeton ends up at 3-8-2. I pay attention to what they'll end up doing moving forward in the ECAC. I look forward to what they're up to because that's a team with some real talent. I don't see it as being a deep team, but I see it as a team that can make some noise. Stop me if you heard this before, though. a little bit of BCitis. They are 0-4-1 outside of the ECAC. They are 3-4-1 with 8 games under their belt in conference play. That's tied with Union and RPI. Only Brown who's 2-4-3, and Yale have played more. They each have played 9 games. So plenty to be concerned about, in my opinion, for Princeton. But the bigger concern, in my estimation, is with the Nittany Lions of Penn State, who, yes, they have a great offensive potential. Yes, they are the top scoring team in the nation by every metric, and it's kind of comical how not close it is and not how close they are to everybody else when it comes to scoring goals. But here's the big problem. They went on holiday break before the end of that game, and their lack of defense showed big time. They're 56th in the country in goals allowed per game so far this season at 3.72. The only teams with poorer defenses than them, Ferris State, Canisius, Merrimack, and Omaha. Canisius somewhat gets away with it because they're only 2 games under 500. The other 3 teams in that list have 4 wins. 4-13-1 for Ferris State, 4-12-1 for Merrimack, 4-10-2 for Omaha. That's not a category that you want to be anywhere near the top in, and Penn State is one of the worst defensive teams. They have not bailed out or gotten their goaltender some help. They haven't gotten him the assistance that he needs, and they haven't gotten him the defensive prowess in front to be able to help him out. So I have to be concerned about Penn State going into the first half break. They're a great offensive team, but there's a reason that they are 6th in the Big Ten right now at 3-4-1, and only poor Sparty is right behind them at 2-5-1. Michigan might be an inconsistent team right now, and Minnesota has had a weird year in their own right, but both of them are ahead of Penn State in the Big Ten right now. Notre Dame continues to be a good force. Wisconsin is a very respectful and kind of surprising team. And Ohio State, no surprises that they are in first place in the conference. They have the tiebreaker right now over Wisconsin despite playing 2 fewer games. So, interesting time to be a Big Ten fan and interesting teams to be, following. This conference is still too small, and they need to get more people in there. I'm still waiting for our friends from the Fighting Illini to get in on this and to start having a team, or maybe people from Chicago can convince Northwestern to do it. But as of right now, the 7 teams in the Big Ten continue to be interesting and continue to provide some curious results and some really good and fun hockey. And despite all the controversy, I'm quite glad that they are a team that is playing, that they are a conference that is playing this sport, and that they are producing teams like what they are. Puck University will continue after a brief message from our sponsor.
Life is about making decisions. At BMW I, we decided it was time to reinvent the car from the ground up, making sure we were open for truly innovative ideas. We decided that the car we wanted must be electric, and it should be made of extremely light and super strong carbon fiber. And finally, we decided to make it more intelligent and added our promise of incomparable driving pleasure. We made all these decisions to offer you a choice. The all-electric BMW i3.
Back on Puck University, I'm Chris Lynch. We've got one more round of games to talk about. I was not at any of these, but still, let's talk about it all. There was one game in Atlantic hockey, which should be mentioned and should be discussed. RIT paid a visit to the Gene Poliseni Center in Rochester, New York, and it was an 8-4 victory by the Rochester Institute of Technology. 8-4, the final score in an offensive barn burner in which RIT had 20 shots on net. The first period alone, they had 38 for the whole game. Holy cow. They, they, wow. And Niagara had their goalie pulled for the final 3 goals of the night. Eric Brown, Alden Dupuis, and Will Calverley had empty net goals. The last 2 were short-handed empty netters for RIT. So this game got weird and got very, very interesting. Brian Wilson actually made more saves. He allowed 5 goals, which I say only. It's not an only stat, but he allowed 5 goals and made 30 saves. Christian Short, the RIT goalie, 4 and 27 saves were his numbers. 4 goals allowed and for saves. It's a good performance for RIT. It was the only showing for Atlantic Hockey, and they produced some weird stuff. And Niagara continue to be in second place in the conference. They're 8-10-1 overall at 7-5-1. They've played 1 fewer game than conference leader Air Force, who's 9-5 at 18 points. That's 3 higher than what Niagara has. American International and Army are tied for third. Mercyhurst and Robert Morris are at 13 each. RIT is in a tie with Sacred Heart and Canisius for 7th, which, by the way, Sacred Heart with double-digit points at this point in the season, only a 1 game under 500. For a program that really has struggled, that's a good sign. Bentley is in the single digits at 9 points, and Holy Cross is regrettably bringing up the rear at 5 conference points. Oh boy, my friends in the Crusaders. I hope that they get themselves turned around. But the Atlantic, first half wrap, Air Force continues to be the driving force in that conference. I'd expect Army to give them a real run for their money. I did not expect Niagara or American International to be where they are. And Canisius, didn't expect them to be as far down in the standings as they are right now. So I still think Air Force is the class in that conference. I still expect them to make the NCAA tournament. And I expect them to give whichever team they face in that tournament to be very, very concerned. As well they should be. Air Force is a great program. I don't think they play again until the Ice Vegas Invitational, which, by the way, I am going there. I am going to the Ice Vegas Invitational. That's going to be quite a flight. That's going to be quite a trip to see Air Force take on St. Lawrence, and then either UConn or Western Michigan. I think that the scheduling will probably end up being that it will end up being Western Michigan, but time will tell, and we'll end up seeing what happens at the T-Mobile Arena in Paradise, Nevada, on the 4th and 5th. The other games that happened, there was a full slate in the WCHA. Oh, before I get into WCHA play, I'm sorry, I'll take somewhat of a non sequitur and get into the other non-conference games. A series between Colorado College and Arizona State, and the Sun Devils continuing to flaunt their skills. 4-2 victory over Colorado College the first night, 4-0 victory over the Tigers the second night. Both of those in the desert. The first game at the Oceanside Ice Arena in Tempe, and both of them actually at that same place. Both games were sellouts at 800-plus people. They are working on building a proper on-campus building, as they should be, and that's very, very good. And it should be noted that the first night, Alex Leclerc had 33 saves, allowed 3 goals, and had a pretty good night. The second night, Leclerc, he allowed 4 goals on 23 saves, so that's a little bit less good. And Joey Dackard continues to be one of the big reasons for why Arizona State is having as much success as they are. 31 saves the second night and 0 goals. He's now solidly in first place for most shutouts this season. He's also played the largest number of games by far. He's played 20 games. Addy Tolvanen, the senior from Northern Michigan, is second at 19 games and 19 starts, both averaging big chunks of their team's ice time. Dackard is 14-6-0. That's a 700% winning percentage. He's at .930 for save percentage and has 5 shutouts. College hockey becomes the game of goalie at points, and Dackard, among the big reasons for the continued success for the Arizona State Sun Devils. And meanwhile, Johnny Walker, who was kept out of some games in their last series before this past one against Colorado College, was kept out of one of the games for precautionary reasons. He was back. He was in full force. 17 goals. My goodness, he had 17 goals. He had 4 over the weekend to separate himself from Evan Barrett, who was, again, didn't have a chance this weekend to extend his goal scoring because he's at World Juniors. Walker, wow. 4 goals this weekend. He's up to 17 this season. He's a wicked scorer. He will, assuming he keeps up anything close to this kind of pace, he'll end up being the nation's top goal scorer, and it's quite a performance and really quite a story to this point. He only has 23 total points, which puts him a little bit further back. He's 6th in points. Brandon Cruz of Bowling Green, who's tied for the national lead in assists with 19, has 25 points. Odin Tufto has 25 of his own. Taro Hirose of Michigan State, the junior, has 26. And then Barrett and Limoges of Penn State have 29 points each. Are your national leading scorers. Limoges, Hirose, and Cruz all have 19 assists this season. They all have been kind of ridiculous. Arizona State, good run, good performance. They're making a bid to be the first independent team to play in the NCAA tournament since 1991 or 92. 92, when Alaska Anchorage took part in that tournament. Now, let's slide over to the slate of WCHA games, starting with Michigan Tech. Kind of a weird weekend for them. They lost the first game to Alabama Huntsville 1-0. They then won the second game in overtime 2-1, again over the Chargers, a team that has really struggled and has not had a good year at all. They had a very good first night in which Mark Sinclair, 39 saves, shutout at the McInnes Student Ice Center, which it's no small task going up to the Upper Peninsula and getting a win. And they did that the first night. They did not do so the second night, as the pressure just wore them down. Mark Sinclair again faced 30-plus shots. He faced 37 the second night. He let in 2 goals, and Robbie Baden, who played in both games, allowed 1 goal each night. First night only faced 17 shots. Second night only faced 15. And his performance the second night was the one that they needed. They ended up winning in overtime, 2-1. Grayson Rettmeyer got the game winner 1 minute and 11 seconds into the extra session. And Michigan Tech, well, according to the national polls, they're a really interesting program at this point. They're the first team outside of the rankings, just behind Cornell. There's 95 votes in the USCHO poll. Michigan Tech has 65. They're just beyond it. They are in second place in the WCHA, or let me correct myself, rather. They are in first place with 29 points, 1 ahead of Bowling Green and 2 ahead of Minnesota State, who played the other really, really interesting and well-watched series at Bowling Green. Both nights, 4-1 victories, and both ones going to the Falcons in Bowling Green, Ohio. The Mavericks end up going home and going into the break with their record having dropped a little bit. They were 14-1-0 entering the weekend. They are now 14. They were 14-2-0. They are now 14-4-0 after this weekend, and it wasn't a particularly strong showing. Matthias Israelsson was the goaltender in the second game. He faced 9 shots and allowed 3 goals. Ryan Bednard, meanwhile, put on a good performance, 22 saves, 1 goal allowed. Dryden McKay, by the way, 17 saves made, so he did okay, but the Mavericks' offense just eluded them for both nights. They only got 27 shots each night, and they got 23 the second night, so 27 and 23, and they didn't have enough to get through Ryan Bednard. And Bowling Green continues to be one of the best defensive teams in the country. In fact, I believe they are the best defensive team for goals against. They are 174 goals allowed. They're tied for the best goal margin. Quinnipiac is in second in goals against. St. Cloud is third at 181. It's a closer race for the defensive numbers than it is on the opposite side on the offense. As for goal margin, it's a plus 37 for Bowling Green and a plus 37 for St. Cloud State. Those are your two top teams in terms of your goal margin statistic, which is one that I always like paying attention to and seeing what the story is. So Bowling Green is 12-3-3. They rise up in the rankings pretty significantly. In the USA Today poll, they go from 12 to 9. Well, Minnesota State falls from 3 to 8. In the USCHO, well, Minnesota State, there wasn't a new USCHO poll issued recently. I'm sure if there were one, then the Mavericks would have fallen a bit. So Bowling Green is still ranked 12th in that one. I'm sure that they will rise up at the next issuing of the USCHO poll for what has been a very good season for a team that only a couple of years ago almost folded. That's a program with some history. That's a program that nearly faded out and nearly died, but has roared back to life with some real success. They get Bemidji State on the 3rd and 4th of January, a Thursday and Friday night series to open up the new year. They'll play Windsor for a exhibition game at noontime at the BGSU Ice Arena on Sunday, December 30th. There'll be one exhibition game before they close out the year, and then they get back into regular play not too long thereafter. Mankato, meanwhile, they get a really, really cool tournament. They play at the Gila River Arena in Glendale in the Desert Classic. And their first test, Minnesota Duluth, the reigning national champions and the number 3 team in the nation. Oh boy, this is going to be a good time. These teams combined for very memorable games last year. They get to face off in a tournament this year. The winner, well, however it works out, the Mavericks will either play Arizona State or Clarkson. Duluth will play the other team from however that matchup goes out, which, by the way, for on the quality of teams for these holiday tournaments, Minnesota State, Duluth, Clarkson, and Arizona State. That's a great weekend of college hockey out there in the Desert Classic, which is quickly becoming one of the better tournaments to pay attention to. Let's then pivot over to what the other things of interesting note in the schedule, which will be this is the holiday segment of the break. The next time that a college hockey team hits the ice is an exhibition game between St. Cloud and the United States under-18 team on the 27th. The next day, we're back to pretty regular play. There'll be a couple non-conference games, including Union hosting Canisius at the Achilles Center in Schenectady, which I'm really interested to see. Mercyhurst makes a trip over to Ohio State. Well, that's pretty cool. And then Denver travels to the Northeast to play Merrimack College, which is good times for all of us. I'll be at that game on the 28th. And the other tournament that's happening out east is the Catamount Cup, taking place at the Gutterson Fieldhouse in Burlington, Vermont. RPI and Northeastern play the first game at 4 o'clock up in the Green Mountain State. The second game is between host Vermont and Alabama Huntsville. And truthfully, Northeastern is and should be the favorite to win that tournament. It should be a Husky win, and I'll be concerned if it isn't. The next day, the 29th, we play the second end of that tournament, which is a set format where RPI will play Vermont in the second game, and Huntsville will play Northeastern in the second game. The other tournament that's getting underway is the one I will be at, the Ledyard Bank Classic at Dartmouth College in Hanover, New Hampshire. Now, this is one of the premier events that has produced some big-time winners. I mean, last year, Minnesota Duluth won this tournament despite the fact that they were missing some of their best players who had gone off to World Juniors, and they won it. It was a turning point for them in their season, and they ended up going on and winning the national championship. And Dartmouth, by the way, if you want a good Twitter to follow, a good hockey Twitter to follow for just the entertainment factor that they provide, go and follow Dartmouth Hockey. Pat Salvis is a comedic genius. He is so much fun to listen to. He is so much fun to talk to. As someone who's gotten to know him a little bit, he's a great guy. He has some really funny stories and some really funny perspectives. He's just a phenomenal individual to follow in the hockey world. So Saturday the 29th, the first game is between Providence and Brown, two teams from the Ocean State, who will be playing in the Mayor's Cup a little bit later on, which is their annual thing in Providence. That will be a puck drop to open up the Ledyard Bank Classic at 4 o'clock. Brown's not having a very good season, and Providence could win a national championship, but still, there's enough history between these schools that they don't like each other, and that always makes for the best hockey, without any hesitation. The second game, Dartmouth, a very interesting team from the ECAC, hosts Army, a fascinating team from Atlantic Hockey. So it's a set schedule as well, where Dartmouth will play Providence the second night, and Army will play Brown the second day. But that's some really fascinating hockey, I think. Army is a curious team that, it's like Air Force. They play a physical game. They play a grindy schedule. Don't get into an overtime. Don't get into long-form battles with them because you'll probably lose. You are not better conditioned than the United States military, and you are playing men who will go into the officer ranks of the United States military when you play Air Force and Army. So if you're going to win it in regulation against those guys. The Desert Classic will be going on throughout this as well. Again, Clarkson, Arizona State, Minnesota State, Mankato, and Minnesota Duluth will be those teams taking part in it. Quinnipiac returns to action. That'll be at 5 p.m. on Saturday the 29th. At the Nassau Coliseum in Uniondale, New York, at 5 p.m., they play Colgate. Princeton hosts Maine. Denver makes a trip over to UMass Lowell, which I'm really curious to see how they fare in that one. And Air Force, well, they do get one time to play before the tournament. They host Bemidji State on the 29th at 9 o'clock at the Cadet Ice Arena. So it's a really full lineup and full schedule for all kinds of interesting things. And then on New Year's Day, we get some cool games. BC gets a chance to try to win an out-of-conference tournament for the first time in many, many, many moons. At 5:05, they're in South Bend, Indiana, to play the Fighting Irish at Compton Family Ice Arena. It will have been more than 2 years, close to 3, since BC will have won a non-conference game when they go in and face the Fighting Irish. Those schools, both Catholic schools, both ones that will get into real competition. BC, a Jesuit school. Notre Dame, not a Jesuit school. I hear a lot of people who actually get this wrong, but Notre Dame isn't actually a Jesuit school, as many people will believe that it is. It is with an order. It's not with a diocese or anything like that. It is with the Congregation of the Holy Cross. I believe, if I actually have this correct, it is the same group that runs the College of the Holy Cross. No, it is not. It's not the same people who run the College of the Holy Cross. They run a couple of other schools, like Stonehill, which is in Easton, Massachusetts. They run a bunch of other places throughout the place. But yeah, Notre Dame, not a Jesuit school. BC is a Jesuit school. I just like to note those kinds of little details that just in case someone assumes that Notre Dame is a Jesuit school, and if it's asked on a game show, you will be able to go on and answer the question of what order they are associated with. Everyone else will get it wrong, and you will get it right. So congratulations for listening to this. You have new information floating around in your head. You are welcome. I hope I get a share of the prize money, and I will not expect it at all. Anyway, so that's a fun game to pay attention to. Colorado College will be at Merrimack. I will be on hand for that. Yale hosts UConn. And then we also get the start to the Great Lakes Invitational. That actually begins on Sunday, the 30th. It features this year Michigan, Michigan Tech, Lake Superior State, and Michigan State in what promises to be it's another good tradition. It's probably the closest to the Beanpot in terms of its longest running tournament and one that has the most history. It does have a bit more rotation in its lineup, but these are fun teams. Lake State, a surprisingly good WCHA team. Michigan Tech, they're the last two tournament champions of that conference. Michigan State, a lot more talent than I think a lot of people gave them credit for, and Michigan has a lot to work for and a lot to play for. A good performance at Little Caesars Arena in Detroit will go a very long way of turning that around. So, believe that's going to do it for us here at Puck University. I will be at all the games that I mentioned, at Merrimack twice, at the Ledyard Bank Classic, and then we'll regroup, and we might have a guest on for the new year. We'll wait to determine that, but again, as it is, some changes going on here at Puck University for right now. It's me flying solo at the loss of my friend, our friend, Tim Williams. Say a prayer for him and for his family that he might be okay and that he might be in good hands if you believe in God as I do. Thank you, Tim, for helping to create this podcast. I intend to carry on. I intend to make good content for as long as I can on this platform, and I intend on sharing the gospel of this sport as best as I can, and I intend on giving you something to be proud of, something that you can watch me do and something that you can watch us work on and just be proud of that you started this, my friend. Thank you, and thank you for listening. Thank you for being a fan on this. You can follow me at CC Lynch Wall on Twitter. You can follow me at CCLynch16, the number, on Instagram. I write stuff for Inside Hockey. I write film reviews for News Talk Florida. I write other stuff for Sports Talk Florida. Please follow Puck University on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spreaker, Stitcher, TuneIn, iHeart, YouTube, and of course here on Blog Talk Radio. Make sure to share this wherever you think people might appreciate hearing another source on college hockey or another place for discussion. Thank you so much for listening. Thank you so much for sharing. Thank you so much for all of the warm-hearted feelings and emotions that you've poured out in support of me and this podcast and of Tim and his family. We all greatly appreciate it, and there aren't enough ways to say thank you. So in the words of Tim Williams, keep your head up and your hits clean.